Mantras of our Divine Mother. Our Divine Mother says, faithfulness is the sure basis of success. In each and every one, the highest consciousness must be the ruler of the life. Our life ought to be governed by the love for truth and the thirst for light. With my blessings is our Divine Mother. Words of our Divine Mother from the collective works of our Divine Mother, Volume 14. Topic: The Soul. Part 7. Subtopic: Parts of the Being, the Soul, the Psychic. Our Divine Mother says the soul is that which comes out of the Divine without ever leaving Him and goes back to Him without ever ceasing from manifestation. The soul is the Divine, made individual without ceasing to be divine. In the soul, the individual and the Divine are eternally one. Thus, to find one's soul is to be united with the Divine. It can therefore be said that the role of the soul is to make of man a true being. Theories differ according to schools and sects, and each one puts forth excellent reasons to support what it asserts. There is certainly truth in whatever one affirms, and any case is not possible. Any case is not only possible but has existed in the history of the earth. Our Divine Mother says, the only thing I can speak of is my own experience. The soul is divine, an eternal portion of the Supreme Divine, and therefore cannot be limited or bound by any law whatever other than its own. These souls are emanated by the Lord to do His work in the world, and each one comes upon earth with a special purpose, for a special action, and with a special destiny, carrying in itself its own law, which is imperative for itself alone and cannot be a general law. Thus, in the eternity of becoming, any case, imaginable or unimaginable, must evidently exist. The soul is eternal and universal, and all these incapacities and impossibilities have no reality for it. When one speaks to the soul of a man, one always speaks to the same soul, whatever may be the difference of body, race, or culture. The soul cannot think the Divine, but knows Him with certitude. Your soul blossoms to the light as a flower opens to the sun. Question: how can I make my soul progress, sweet mother? For this, our Divine Mother says, to have any action on your soul, you must be first conscious of it. And then, when you will be conscious of your soul, you will probably find out that instead of you making your soul progress, it is your soul who will help you to progress. Question: sweet mother, what is soul and in what form does it exist in us? For this, our Divine Mother says, the first form of the soul is a spark of light from the Divine. By evolution, it becomes an individualized being, and then it can take the form it wants. The mind, the life, and the body must become and live what the soul knows and is. When one has an awakened soul, it is not easy to get rid of it, so it is better to obey its orders. Obey your soul, it alone has the right to govern your life. Psychic center, luminous and calm, It is made to govern the human being. The psychic gets its power of expression when it governs the whole being. The psychic power organizes the activities of the nature to make them progress. Under the psychic influence, all activity becomes balanced. The psychic influence is our Divine Mother. The psychic influence compels the physical to turn towards the divine. Let this house be a symbol of the psychic, the temple of the eternal divine presence. Live in the consciousness of the psychic center. Thus, your will express the divine's will alone, and your transformed being will then be able to receive and manifest the divine love. The center of the human being is the psychic, which is the dwelling place of the immanent divine. Unification means organization and harmonization of all the parts of the being, mental, vital, and physical, around the center, so that all the activities of the being may be the correct expression of the will of the divine presence. Unless and until the whole of the individual consciousness is organized around the central divine presence, the moments are fugitive, although recurrent, and we cannot expect them to have any permanence. Nothing is permanent in a terrestrial being except the psychic, says our Divine Mother. A sadhak wrote, after bright periods of sadhana, dark periods returned again and again. For this, our Divine Mother says, this is a proof that your whole being is not united around the central psychic presence. This is a personal task that each individual must do for himself. The help is always there, but the effectivity of its action is in the measure of the receptivity and the conscious appeal. After all, it is a question of patience in the endeavor. A human being is made of many different parts, and it takes time and conscious effort to harmonize and unify all these parts. When you surrender, it is not the whole of your being that did so. Little by little, some other part that had not surrendered came to surface, and the joy of the surrender vanished and was replaced by dullness and indifference. But after some time, this part also gets converted, and thus the happy condition comes back. Our Divine Mother says, your letter is just with me, bringing me to you your problem, which, by the way, is the problem of the life of all human beings, especially when they have reached a certain degree of inner development but are not yet on the summit of spiritual freedom through the unification of their being around their conscious soul. For it is the lack of unification which is the cause of all the problems. One part of the being pulls one way and another pulls the other way. Sometimes one is stronger and gives a certain orientation to life. Sometimes it is the other. And then the orientation suddenly changes, and the result is an incoherence. And it is the unsatisfied part which usually comes to the surface to express its want of satisfaction. So, unless one is a sage, one is never satisfied with the life one leads and always misses the life one could have led, whether in one direction or the other. Our Divine Mother says, in your case, there is something more, as your soul remains very closely linked with my being. As the contact with the supramental consciousness grows more and more total and constant, it acts very strongly on your soul like an almost irresistible attraction. This is what has happened in 1958. To conclude an essay, and pleasant life can only satisfy the outer being. But what answers in the physical being to the soul's influence needs for its flowering a life more in conformity with the soul's needs, and languishes when it cannot find it. It is because an individual is not made of all one piece but of different entities which sometimes even contradict each other. Some want the spiritual life, others are attached to the things of this world. It is a long and difficult work to reconcile all these parts and unify them. The force and light received by the most developed parts gradually spread to the rest of the being by a process of assimilation, and during this period of assimilation, the progress of the parts are in front seems to be interrupted. This is what Sri Aurobindo was speaking about. In fact, all different paths are correct in their argument, and the wisdom is to go deep enough in the consciousness to find the place where they meet and agree, completing one another rather than contradicting. As for the actual action, a smooth, harmonious working is generally better than the difficulties created by too rigid principles, but that also is not absolute, and the ideal condition is at each occasion to receive in the inner silence the guidance from above. With constant practice and goodwill, it becomes possible. The psychic inspiration alone is true. All that comes from the vital and the mind is necessarily mixed with egoism and is arbitrary. One should not act in reaction to outer contact, but with an immutable vision of love and goodwill. Everything else is a mixture which can only have confused and mixed results and perpetuate the disorder. It is not the psychic being that suffers from personal reasons, it is the mind and vital and ordinary consciousness of ignorant man. This is because the contact between the outer consciousness and the psychic consciousness is not well established. He in whom the contact has been well established is always happy. The psychic being works with perseverance and ardor for the union to be made an accomplished fact, but it never complains and knows how to wait for the hour of realization to come. Our Divine Mother says the outer being left to itself is not very responsible, is most often the plaything of the forces of nature, but the inner or higher being, the deeper consciousness, is the master and builder of our destiny. That is why it is so important to discover this sovereign consciousness and unite with it in order to put an end to all the incoherence of life and all the conflicts of nature. To find the psychic, one must conquer the desires of the vital and silence the mind, and then make a sincere submission to the divine of whom the psychic is instrument in man. The inner contact with the psychic is a concrete and undeniable fact which imposes itself on all sincere consciousness. The psychic is always there and it is strong. It is the receptivity that is weak. The best way is to get rid of the rule of the ego, is to find the psychic being, instrument of the divine in human beings. Go deep into yourself, the heart region, and aspire steadily. The true meaning of the psychic is unmistakable. It is indispensable that each one finds his psychic, unites with it definitely. It is through the psychic that the supramental will manifest itself. These are the words of our Divine Mother.
And Satyavan looked out from his soul's door and felt the enchantment of her liquid voice fill his youth's purple ambience and enjoy the haunting miracle of a mastered by the honey of a strange flower mouth dawn to show spaces opening round the brow. He turned to the vision like a sea to the moon, and suffered a dream of beauty and of change. He came across the golden sword. Gaze met close gaze, and clung in sight's embrace.